Before the story starts, a quick reminder. If you enjoy deep breakdowns of complex relationships and raw emotional journeys like this one, make sure to subscribe and leave a like so more people can find these analyses and join the conversation about the choices we make, the patterns we repeat, and the courage it takes to stop a painful cycle. Now, imagine this. Have you ever promised yourself that your life would be nothing like the one you grew up watching, only to realize, much later, that you might be walking down a very similar path without even noticing? That is exactly the emotional battlefield where this story lives, following a woman who has spent her entire life trying to prove to herself that she can build something better, safer, and more loving than the chaos that shaped her childhood. The film from 2024 follows Lily Bloom, played by Blake Lively, a woman who moves to Boston determined to start over and slowly discovers how hard it is to escape patterns that feel familiar, even when they hurt. Lily begins the story standing between two worlds. The memory of a younger version of herself who watched her parents' turbulent relationship, and the adult version who has just buried her father and refuses to speak well of him, even at his funeral. Her silence is not just defiance. It is a statement that she will no longer protect the image of a man who made her childhood a place of fear and confusion. And that decision already hints at her internal vow that the story ends with her. The movie then shifts her to Boston, where she opens a flower shop. An oddly hopeful dream for someone whose past is so heavy, but that is exactly the point. She is obsessed with beauty growing out of rough soil. The shop is not just a business. It is a metaphor for Lily herself. A person who keeps trying to arrange something lovely out of broken pieces, refusing to let the ugliness she saw at home define her future. Into this new life walks Ryle Kincaid, a talented neurosurgeon who feels like everything her younger self believed she deserved but never saw between her parents. Charming, intelligent, funny, and at first intensely respectful and supportive of her dreams. Ryle is introduced almost like a wish granted by the universe. His career radiates stability, his confidence feels magnetic, and his interest in Lily is immediate and consuming, which to her feels like validation after years of feeling small and overlooked. The film leans into the chemistry between them, building their connection through little moments of banter, shared laughter, and late-night talks that seem to promise that Lily finally has a partner who sees her, not just someone to stand beside him. As an audience, it is easy to fall for this version of Ryle alongside Lily because the script deliberately makes their romance feel like a reward after all the pain she has survived, almost as if the story is trying to convince us that she has earned this fairy tale. But the narrative plants quiet warning signs early on, almost like hairline cracks in a glass that still looks perfect from far away. Ryle's intensity sometimes tilts into impatience, and his frustration shows in quick flashes that pass as jokes or isolated outbursts, easy to ignore because the good moments still vastly outnumber the bad ones. The first time his temper crosses a line, the film makes a crucial choice. It does not present it as a monstrous act from a stranger, but as a terrifying moment from someone Lily loves and believes she knows, which is what makes it so confusing and disorienting for her. Immediately afterward, Ryle is full of remorse and explanations, sharing stories about his own childhood and a traumatic incident involving his brother that he claims fractured him in ways he never fully repaired, asking Lily to see him as broken, not dangerous. This is where the script becomes more than just a romance or drama. It becomes a psychological portrait of how cycles of harm keep themselves alive through excuses, guilt, and empathy used against the person who is being hurt. Lily's background makes her especially vulnerable to this, because she has spent her entire life watching her mother accept apologies and explanations from her father, wrestling with the question of why someone would stay in a situation that causes so much pain. Now that she is living her own adult life, she finds herself in the exact emotional maze she once judged from the outside, torn between the part of her that swore never to repeat her mother's choices and the part of her that desperately wants to believe that Ryle can change. Each time his temper surfaces, the film shows how Lily negotiates with herself, shrinking the severity of what happened, magnifying his tears and promises, and convincing herself that it was an exception rather than a pattern. As Ryle's presence grows stronger in her life, another figure from Lily's past steps back into the frame, Atlas Corrigan. her first love, a boy from her teenage years who once carried his own painful story and found fleeting safety in her family's kitchen and her quiet companionship. In the present, Atlas has transformed from a struggling, vulnerable teenager into a successful chef and restaurant owner, but his core remains the same: gentle, steady, and deeply protective of Lily's well-being. Their reunion is emotionally loaded, not because the film wants to create a simple love triangle, but because Atlas represents the version of Lily who still believed she could choose a different kind of life before she internalized so much compromise and self-blame. When Atlas notices signs that something is wrong in Lily's current relationship, he becomes a mirror reflecting back a truth she is not ready to face, and his concern forces her to confront what she has been trying to minimize. Ryle's reaction to Atlas's reappearance reveals another layer of his personality. His jealousy does not look like playful possessiveness. It looks like fear of losing control, wrapped in the language of love and protection. He framed his life with Lily as something fragile, something that can be easily destroyed by outsiders. But what the film slowly reveals is that the real threat to that life is not Atlas. It is Ryle's inability to manage his own impulses. The more insecure he feels, the more he tries to tighten his grip, and Lily finds herself constantly working to keep the peace, adjusting her behavior and choices to avoid triggering his anger. This is one of the most realistic parts of the script. The danger does not appear as a constant storm, but as a weather pattern of sun and sudden thunder, keeping Lily in a state of hope and fear at the same time. One pivotal moment arrives when Lily discovers that she is pregnant, and the story uses this turning point to force her to look at her situation from a new angle, beyond her own complicated love for Ryle. Until then, she has been negotiating with herself, trying to manage the risk while holding on to the relationship. But the idea of bringing a child into that environment instantly connects her back to her own childhood memories. She imagines a little girl growing up watching the same kind of outbursts, the same apologies, the same emotional confusion, and realizes that if she stays, she is no longer just trying to survive. She is shaping another person's world in the same harmful ways that damaged her. The pregnancy does not magically give her courage, but it sharpens her awareness, turning the abstract idea of breaking the cycle into an urgent, non-negotiable choice. As the story builds toward its emotional climax, Lily reaches a point where the gap between what she hoped this relationship would be and what it actually is becomes impossible to deny. One particularly intense incident pushes her past the threshold of rationalization, and she finally allows herself to see the pattern, not the isolated episodes, recognizing that love is being used as a shield to excuse behavior that keeps putting her in emotional and physical danger. In that moment of clarity, she turns to Atlas, not as a romantic fantasy, but as a safe harbor where she can protect herself long enough to make clear decisions about her future. Atlas supports her without pushing for anything in return, respecting her autonomy and focusing on her safety and that of her unborn child, embodying the kind of steady care that contrasts sharply with Ryle's erratic passion. The film's final movement focuses less on surprise twists and more on the slow, painful work of Lily asserting new boundaries in a situation where every emotional tie pulls her backward. Ryle still insists he loves her, still expresses remorse, still clings to the story that his past trauma explains, but does not excuse what he has done. And that is what makes Lily's decision so complex. She does not walk away because she stopped caring about him. She walks away because she chooses to care more about herself and her daughter, refusing to let devotion and history outweigh the reality of what living with him actually means. The screenplay underlines that bravery here is not about one explosive moment of defiance, but about the daily choice to uphold a line she has drawn, even when nostalgia and tenderness tempt her to erase it. When Lily gives birth to her daughter, the emotional stakes reach their peak, because she is now face to face with the person for whom she has been trying to rewrite the script of her life. Ryle wants to be present, and the story does not reduce him to a one-dimensional villain. He is shown as a man who genuinely cares, but whose unresolved issues make him unsafe, and that complexity is part of what makes Lily's decision so heavy. In a quiet, decisive conversation, she tells him that their relationship as a couple cannot continue, and that for the sake of their child, the pattern must stop here. In that choice, she finally lives up to the title's promise. She makes sure that what she witnessed as a child does not repeat in the next generation, even if it means breaking her own heart in the process. The movie closes with a sense of bittersweet hope rather than pure happiness, because Lily's victory is not clean or easy. It is full of grief for the life she wanted and the version of Ryle she wished were real all the time. Atlas remains in her orbit as a symbol of a different kind of love, patient and grounded, but the film wisely keeps the focus on Lily's growth rather than turning the ending into a simple shift from one partner to another. The true transformation is internal. She now understands that love without safety is not enough, that empathy can become a trap when it keeps you in harm's way, and that breaking a cycle often means making choices that people on the outside might not fully understand. The final emotional note suggests that Lily's story is only beginning, but this chapter closes on her terms, with her voice finally louder than the echoes of her past. What makes this film particularly powerful is the way it shows how easily someone strong, intelligent, and self-aware can still find themselves in a relationship that contradicts everything they promised themselves as a teenager. The script does not portray Lily as naive or weak. Instead, it reveals how complicated it is to untangle love from loyalty, compassion from responsibility, and forgiveness from self-erasure. By paralleling her childhood memories with her adult choices, the story invites the audience to question the narratives they inherited from their own families and to ask where they might be repeating what once hurt them, even unconsciously. In that sense, the title becomes less of a statement and more of a challenge. For any viewer who recognizes themselves in Lily, the question is whether they are willing to be the point where the pattern finally stops. So now, after walking through Lily Bloom's journey from hopeful new beginnings to the painful courage of letting go, here is the question that lingers. If you were standing where she stands at the end, holding a new life in your arms, looking at someone you love who also hurt you deeply, do you believe you would have the strength to make the same decision she makes? Or do you think you might still try to give that relationship one more chance, hoping this time will finally be different?